Some wounds don't scream. They sit there quiet like a light left on in an empty room. And years later, one smell, one sentence, one sound of a suitcase rolling on a driveway can drag us right back to the moment we realized we were alone, and no one was coming. Tonight's story isn't here so Chung Ta can enjoy someone getting what they deserve, and it's not here so Chung Ta can point a finger and feel clean. It's a story about what neglect looks like when it's dressed up as independence. About a child being handed $20 like it's a plan. About a mother smiling like this is freedom. And a kid swallowing fear like it's dinner. The title is At 11. My mom left me with $20 and went to Europe for a month. When they returned, I need you to stay with me because the day they finally came back, what my mom saw inside that house made her freeze, then gasp. No, this can't be happening. Not because it wasn't real, but because it was the first time she was forced to look at what she'd done. Now, let's go back to the beginning. My name is Zephyr Kane Hollis. I don't tell this for pity. I tell it because I needed someone to hear me back then, and maybe you've needed that too. Before I share my story, can you say hi in the comments or tell me where you're watching from? Sometimes knowing someone is there makes all the difference. And if you can hit subscribe. Not because I'm chasing numbers, but because stories like this don't get told unless someone stays. Thank you. And now, let me tell you everything. I didn't always live by paperwork, but paperwork is how I survived. That sounds dramatic until you've watched a grown adult smile at you like nothing's wrong while you're holding a truth that can ruin their life. Tonight I'm in a small office off Bay Street in Savannah, the kind of room that smells like stale coffee and printer toner. The kind of room where the air conditioner never quite gets the temperature right. I'm supposed to be finishing a compliance review for a client number's risk flag signatures, but my screen is filled with a different kind of file. A minor. Left without supervision. Parents out of the country. No verified caretaker. One line in the report hits me like a fist because it's not just a sentence. It's a sound. It's a door shutting. Guardians departed internationally for extended travel. Child remained in residence without supervision. I tell myself it's work, that I'm 31 and this is just another case. But my hand moves on its own, scrolling past the summary and straight into the parts my body remembers: timeline, call logs, supporting evidence. The clinical language doesn't fool me. I know what those words look like when they're real. I know what they smell like. Dust on a kitchen counter. A fridge that hums too loud because there's nothing inside it to muffle the sound. A house that feels bigger every hour you're alone in it. There are things I'm good at now: documentation, pattern recognition, staying calm when other people panic, and I'd love to tell you it's because I'm naturally sharp. It's not. It's because when I was 11, I had to record my own reality before someone older and louder rewrote it for me. My name is Zephyr Kane Hollis, and the first time I learned what evidence meant wasn't in a courtroom. It was in my mother's kitchen. I can still feel the paper of that $20 bill in my palm like it's happening right now. Not crisp, not new, crumpled and soft at the corners from being shoved into a pocket and forgotten. It was warm too because my hand was sweating so hard I could feel it soaking the ink. It was last summer. Savannah was doing what Savannah does, heavy heat sunlight that made the street shimmer a lazy breeze that didn't actually cool anything. Outside, everything looked normal. Kids riding bikes down our tree-lined block, neighbors watering their lawns, a dog barking at a delivery truck like it was protecting the whole city. Inside our house, there was this strange, bright energy that wasn't for me. It was for leaving. My mother, Marla Hollis, swept through the hallway like she was late for something important, except the important thing wasn't me. She had on a light trench coat even though it was warm because she was always dressed like she might be photographed. Her perfume hit the room before she did, clean and expensive like it belonged in airports and hotel lobbies. She rolled her suitcase toward the front door, the wheels clicking over the threshold like a countdown. She didn't look nervous. She looked relieved, like she was finally stepping into a version of herself she liked better. "You're independent now," she said with a bright, rehearsed smile as if she was giving me a gift. "You're not a baby anymore. Just order food if you need to." Independent. That was her word, not mine. She said it like it meant freedom. It felt like abandonment with a prettier label. I stood there 11 years old, barefoot on the cool tile, holding that 20 in my fist, like it could anchor me to the floor. No babysitter, no neighbor on standby, no list on the fridge that said what to eat, when to eat, who to call if something went wrong. Not even a real goodbye. She leaned down, pressed a quick kiss to my forehead, and it was so fast it felt more like a stamp than affection. My dad, Derek, was there technically. He moved through the room with a phone glued to his ear, half listening, half nodding, already elsewhere. He carried bags like an assistant, not a parent. His voice stayed light, casual, like the world was just a series of errands and deals. When he glanced at me, it wasn't to check my face. It was to make sure I wasn't making a scene. "You'll be fine," he said into the phone, then to me without changing tone, as if I was part of the same conversation. "Be good for your mom. Be good." Like this was about behavior, like my job was to make their trip easier. I wanted to ask 100 questions. Who's coming over? What if the stove won't light? What if I get sick? What if someone knocks on the door? What if I run out of food? But every question felt like it would make me look small, and in our house, small was something you got punished for. My mother loved the idea of me being mature the way she loved the idea of a perfect family photo. Clean lines, no mess, no need. She didn't say I'll call every night. She didn't say Mrs. Barrow next door has a key. She didn't say your school knows. There was no safety net because a safety net would mean admitting there was something to fall from. Instead, she reached into her purse, pulled out a shiny credit card, and placed it on the kitchen counter like it was a solution. The card caught the light, looked official, looked grown up. She tapped it with a manicured nail. "Emergency card," she said. "If you need anything, use that. Easy, easy." She made it sound like ordering a pizza was the same as being cared for. She made it sound like a piece of plastic could replace a person. I remember staring at that card and feeling a tiny flicker of relief anyway, because when you're 11 and scared, you grab whatever hope you can. I didn't know yet that hope can be a prop. I didn't know yet the card was just there, so she could tell herself she'd handled it. She hoisted her suitcase handle. Derek grabbed his keys without ever looking at the pantry. My mother stepped out onto the porch, and right before she crossed the threshold, she lifted her phone, angled it toward herself, and snapped a quick photo her face, the sunlight, the doorway behind her. Like she was documenting the moment she became free. I saw it in the reflection of the hallway mirror. I saw the little pause as she checked the shot, adjusted her smile, and then slipped the phone away. Then the suitcase wheels rolled down the driveway. The car doors shut. The engine started. The sound of their laughter faded into the warm summer air like it had never belonged to my house in the first place. I stood in the hallway with the 20 in my hand, listening to the emptiness settle. It didn't rush in all at once. It crept. It filled the corners. It sat on the couch cushions. It hovered by the kitchen counter where the emergency card waited like a lie. "I'll be fine," I said out loud to nobody. I said it like saying it could make it true. My voice echoed in the hallway and came back smaller. I walked to the front door and watched my neighborhood through the glass, normal lives moving past normal parents inside houses with lights on. I waited for my phone to buzz. A "call me when you're settled." A "love you." Anything. Nothing came. That's when the question I didn't want to ask pressed against my ribs. What happens if the only safety they left me is fake? The lock clicked once like punctuation. The silence after it felt like the first page of a file being opened, and I was the only person in that house who knew I'd just become a case. The first problem hit me about 10 minutes after the taxi pulled away. I didn't even make it to the couch before reality started peeling the paint off my mother's independent speech. I stood at the kitchen counter, phone in my hand, staring at the shiny emergency card like it owed me something. My stomach was already tight, not from hunger yet, but from the kind of fear that makes your body brace for impact. I opened the food delivery app my mom used when she didn't feel like cooking. It still had her saved addresses, her favorite orders, her little notes like extra napkins. I entered the card number carefully, trying not to breathe too loud, and hit pay. Declined. I blinked like maybe the screen was wrong. I tried again. Declined. I switched apps. Declined. I tried one more because denial is a stupid kind of hope and I had nothing else. Declined. I flipped the card over looking for instructions, a sticker, anything. There was nothing. No PIN. No activation number. No note in my mother's handwriting that said, "Here's what to do." Just a clean, untouched piece of plastic that looked prepared and wasn't. My fingers started to shake so badly I had to set the phone down. I remember thinking very clearly that I wasn't just alone. I was alone with a dead lifeline. A flotation device with no air. I checked the fridge like food might have appeared while I wasn't looking. Half a bottle of salad dressing. A few wilted grapes. Leftover takeout in a container that smelled sour when I opened it. I closed it fast. I opened the pantry, lined up what I saw like it was inventory, 2 cans of something I didn't recognize, 1 can of soup, a box of cereal that felt too light, peanut butter, with a thin smear left, bread that was already starting to go stiff. I did the math without calling it math. If I was careful, if I rationed, if I didn't grow too fast, if I didn't get hungry the way kids are supposed to get hungry, I could make it stretch. Day 1. I tried to turn it into a game because games make you feel like you chose the rules. I sliced the bread as thin as I could, spread peanut butter so carefully it barely covered the surface, and told myself real survivors knew how to make things last. I poured cereal into a bowl and stared at it for a second like it was precious, then ate it slowly, trying to trick my stomach into gratitude. I even laughed once, an ugly little sound, thinking someday I'd tell this story, and it would sound wild and impossible, and people would say, "No way." By the end of that first afternoon, it stopped being funny. The house wasn't just quiet. It was loud in the wrong ways. The refrigerator hum, the air conditioner clicking on and off, the creak of floorboards when I moved like the house was paying attention. I turned the TV on just for noise and let random daytime shows fill the room so I wouldn't have to hear my own breathing. At some point, I wandered toward the hallway where the phone sat on a little table. We still had a landline then, mostly for show, mostly because my mom liked the idea of a proper home. My eyes landed on a small note taped beside it. I hadn't noticed it earlier because I wasn't looking for traps yet. The paper was pale yellow, the handwriting neat and sharp, my mom's. It said, "Don't bother the neighbors. Don't embarrass me." I read it twice like maybe I was misunderstanding. The words didn't change. They just got heavier. That was when something in me shifted. Because it wasn't just that she'd left. It was that she'd left me with a rule designed to keep me quiet. A little leash made of shame. A reminder that her reputation mattered more than my safety. I pictured Mrs. Helen Barrow next door, an older woman who always waved, who smelled like laundry soap and cinnamon, who once offered me cookies when my mom forgot it was the class bake sale. I pictured walking to her porch and knocking. And then I pictured my mom's face when she found out I'd made a scene. The fear of her anger wrapped itself around my throat tighter than hunger did. I put the note back exactly where it was, like moving it would be a crime. Then I stared at the front door. The street outside looked the same as it always did, sunlight through Spanish moss, neighbors, walking dogs, kids laughing somewhere down the block. It felt like a different planet because none of those people knew. If I walked out there, I would have to explain why I was alone. I would have to answer the question adults always ask first, the one that decides whether they believe you. Where are your parents? I tried to find a way around that question. I went into the garage holding the emergency card like maybe the problem was me. Maybe I could drive to the store. Maybe I could fix it. The garage smelled like hot concrete and old oil. My dad's car sat there like a promise I couldn't cash. I didn't have keys. Even if I did, I was 11. I climbed into the driver's seat anyway because kids do stupid things when they're desperate. I wrapped my hands around the steering wheel and stared at the dashboard like it might light up if I willed it. It stayed dead. Of course it did. I wasn't trapped in a house. I was trapped in being a child. I walked to the end of the driveway and looked toward the corner store a few blocks away. I could see the sign in the distance, the bright colors that made it look friendly. I started walking. The sidewalk burned my feet through my shoes. My mouth was dry. Every step felt like I was doing something wrong. When I got close enough to see through the store windows, I stopped. I saw the owner behind the counter, an older man who knew everyone's name, the kind of adult who asks questions because he's bored and because he cares. I imagined him seeing me and smiling and saying, "Hey buddy, what can I get you?" And then, "Where's your mom today?" My heart started hammering so hard it made my ears ring. I turned around before I ever touched the door. I walked home with my shoulders tight like I was sneaking back into a place I didn't deserve. That night, the sky outside my window turned deep blue, and then black, and my house felt like it was holding its breath. I sat on the living room carpet with the TV still running and the cereal box beside me because it felt safer to be close to food even if there wasn't much. My phone stayed silent. No check-in. No good night. No, did you eat? The only proof my parents still existed was the note by the phone telling me not to tell anyone they'd left. I went to my mom's laptop like maybe there was a code somewhere, an email about activating the card, something that made this make sense. The screen lit up with her LifeWork emails stacked like they were the most important thing in the world, travel confirmations, calendar reminders. I found her itinerary. I found hotel names. I found a reservation email that made my stomach drop because it proved she didn't plan to come back in a few days. She planned a month, a real month, 30 nights. And in all of it, there wasn't one line that said, "Make sure Zephyr is taken care of." That was the moment I stopped calling it fear. It became clarity. Everything had a plan except me. I grabbed my notebook from my backpack, the same one I used for school, and flipped to a clean page. I wrote one word at the top in big, hard letters: evidence. I didn't know where I'd learned the word. Maybe from TV. Maybe from the way adults talked about consequences when they wanted you to behave. I just knew I needed something that couldn't be argued with later. Under the heading, I started writing like a report. Date. Time. Parents left for Europe for 1 month. Left me with $20. Emergency card declined, not activated, no PIN, no babysitter, no neighbor informed, no check-ins, pantry inventory. I listed what I had left down to the last half-empty cereal box because numbers feel safer than feelings. As I wrote, my hands steadied, my breathing slowed. The house didn't get warmer, and my stomach didn't fill, but something in me stopped floating. I had a page. I had proof that I was here. Proof that this was happening. Proof that if something went wrong, it wasn't because I was dramatic or ungrateful or not independent enough. I stared at the word evidence until my eyes burned. Then I looked around my kitchen, the dead card on the counter, the quiet phone, the empty spaces where a parent should have been, and a new kind of question formed sharper than hunger. If this is a file, who do I hand it to? And when adults finally look at it, will they believe the kid? Or will they believe the people who left him behind? By the second morning, my body started learning a new schedule, one my mother hadn't planned for. Wake up hungry, stand up too fast, and see the room tilt. Pretend you're fine because the alternative is admitting you're not. I washed my face in cold water until my skin stung, then stared at myself in the bathroom mirror like I could talk strength into my eyes. 11-year-old me looked smaller than I remembered. My cheekbones were sharp in a way they hadn't been before, and my lips were dry from breathing through my mouth at night. I packed my backpack slower than usual because moving slow made the day feel like it might last longer, like I wasn't racing toward the moment someone would notice something was wrong. I kept telling myself I just had to get through school. School was structure. School was people. If I could act normal, there maybe the rest of it would stay contained. The walk to the bus stop felt like walking through someone else's life. Savannah was bright and casual, the kind of morning where neighbors waved with coffee cups and kids argued about summer plans. I watched a dad tie his son's shoe on the curb like it was nothing, like care was the most natural thing in the world. My stomach clenched so hard it hurt. Not jealousy exactly, more like confusion. Like I'd been dropped into a place where the rules were different and nobody bothered to explain them to me. In class, hunger didn't feel like an empty stomach. It felt like fog. The teacher's voice came through like a radio in another room, and the words on the board didn't settle in my brain the way they normally did. I kept my face smooth anyway. I smiled when the other kids joked. I nodded when someone asked if I'd finished a worksheet. I learned in real time how to laugh without letting it touch my eyes. At one point, I stood up to sharpen my pencil, and a wave of dizziness rushed over me so fast I grabbed the edge of my desk. My vision pinched at the corners dark for a second, then snapped back. I sat down like nothing happened, like I hadn't just felt my own body betray me. When lunchtime came, I realized I'd made a mistake I couldn't hide as easily. Kids don't notice much until they do, and lunch is when they're looking. I opened my bag and found the sad little sandwich I'd packed bread so thin it felt like paper peanut butter spread like a stain. No fruit, no snack, no drink besides tap water in a bottle I'd rinsed too many times. A boy behind me leaned over and wrinkled his nose like he'd smelled something weird. "That's it?" he asked, half joking. My cheeks burned. I shrugged like I didn't care. "I'm not that hungry," I lied, even though the lie made my stomach growl in protest. Mrs. Klein, my homeroom teacher, stopped by my table while I chewed slowly, dragging time out like I could make food appear if I was patient enough. She watched me a little too long. Teachers have a look when they're adding things up in their heads, and I saw it flicker across her face. "Zephyr," she said gently, "did you forget your lunch money today?" Her voice was soft, but the question felt like a spotlight. A couple kids glanced over. I shook my head fast. "No, ma'am. I'm good." She didn't move right away. "You seem a little off. Everything okay at home?" That was the door, the simplest door in the world. All I had to do was step through it. All I had to do was tell the truth. But my mother's note by the landline, "Don't bother the neighbors. Don't embarrass me," might as well have been carved into the wall of my skull. I heard her voice in my head, calm and deadly. "Why would you tell people our business? Do you know what that makes me look like?" I forced a small smile. "Just tired," I said. "We had a late night." Mrs. Klein's eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger and concern. "Make sure you're eating okay. If you need anything, you can come see me." She touched the back of my chair like a promise and walked away. I sat there after she left, staring at my sandwich like it was evidence of something I couldn't name out loud. I wasn't just hungry. I was performing. Every hour, every answer, every smile was a mask designed to protect two adults who weren't even in the country. After school, I stood in the hallway with my backpack strap cutting into my shoulder, watching kids get picked up. Cars rolled up. Moms leaned out windows. Dads shouted reminders. Somebody's grandma handed out popsicles like it was a holiday. I waited for the bus and tried not to look like I was waiting for anything else. On the ride home, I pulled my phone out and opened my messages with Lila Bennett. Lila was my best friend, the kind of friend who knew my favorite candy and the exact way I liked my haircut. Her name glowed on the screen like safety. My thumbs started moving before I could stop them. I typed "My mom left. I'm alone. I don't know what to do." Then I stared at it, my throat tightening. I imagined her reading it. I imagined her mom reading it over her shoulder. I imagined it spreading through the tiny web of parents who all knew each other in Savannah. I imagined my mother coming home to whispers to looks to the kind of pity she hated more than anything. I deleted the whole thing until the text box was empty again. I tried again. I typed, "Can you come over?" I erased that too. In the end, I sent something harmless, something that sounded normal. "Hey, did you do the math homework?" The little delivered checkmark appeared. No reply. I stared at my screen until it dimmed. Then I locked the phone like it was a weapon I didn't know how to use. The silence from my best friend didn't mean she didn't care. It probably meant she was outside somewhere laughing, living a normal day. But to me, it felt like being left behind all over again, left in a quiet house, and left in the world of kids who still had someone looking out for them. When I got home, the air inside our house was stale, like it hadn't moved since the door closed behind my parents. I went straight to the kitchen and opened the fridge again, even though I already knew what was inside. The light snapped on, revealing the same emptiness, but somehow it looked worse than the night before. I ate the last decent thing without meaning to 2 bites of leftover chicken that tasted like cold salt and guilt. Then I stood in front of the pantry and counted again. I wasn't counting food anymore. I was counting days. I pulled my notebook out and opened to the page that already said evidence. The words still looked strange in my handwriting, too big for an 11-year-old's life. I wrote with the blunt precision that made me feel steadier. Day 2. Ate thin peanut butter sandwich, cereal water. No calls, no check-ins. Card declined. I didn't write. I'm scared. I didn't write. I miss them. I wrote facts because facts couldn't be argued with later. That night I went to my mom's laptop again. I told myself I was looking for the pin. I was. But I was also looking for proof of something that would make this feel like less of a choice and more of a mistake. I clicked through her email and found what I didn't want to find: confirmations for flights booked weeks earlier, hotel reservations across multiple cities, a color-coded calendar titled Europe Reset. It wasn't spontaneous. It wasn't a last-minute emergency. It was planned, polished, and protected. And in all those emails, there was still nothing about me. No sitter, no neighbor check-in, no arrangement. Then I saw something else, an automatic message from my school system with a subject line like "Guardian Acknowledgement Required." It was dated before they left. A notice about a policy update, something parents were supposed to confirm with a click. It had been opened. Not confirmed. Just opened and left there like everything else that required responsibility. My stomach turned. That was when the last bit of hope fell away. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't forgetfulness. This was a decision made in advance. I sat back in the chair and stared at the screen until my eyes watered. The house was so quiet I could hear the laptop fan whirring, working harder than any adult in my life at that moment. I closed the computer slowly and looked around our kitchen: clean counters, staged fruit bowl with maybe one bruised apple, the emergency card still sitting there like a joke. I thought about what Mrs. Klein had asked me. Everything okay at home? I'd lied without blinking. I'd protected them without getting anything in return. Something in me hardened. Not into hate. Into clarity. If nobody was going to make sure I existed in this story, I would. On day 3 after school, I set my phone on the kitchen counter and angled it so it could see my face. My hands trembled as I hit record. For a second, I almost stopped. The idea of documenting it made it feel real in a way I wasn't ready for. But I kept going because real was already here, whether I named it or not. Day 3, I said quietly. My voice sounded smaller than it did in my head. I'm still alone. I swallowed and forced myself to keep my eyes on the camera. The card doesn't work. I tried. There's no pin. I ate the last decent thing in the fridge yesterday. I paused, listening to the refrigerator hum behind me like a witness. If you're seeing this, it means someone finally asked what happened to me. I stopped recording and stared at the screen for a beat. My face on the video looked tired, scared, and stubborn all at once. I saved the clip and locked my phone like I was sealing it in an evidence bag. My heart hammered so hard it made my ribs ache. Part of me hoped nobody would ever see it. Another part of me wanted it to explode in my mother's face when she came home, because this was something she couldn't talk her way out of. That night I lay in bed with my notebook tucked under my pillow like a secret weapon, and I listened to the house breathe around me. I kept thinking about that line I'd said to the camera. If you're seeing this, it means someone finally asked. The terrifying question underneath it was simple. What if nobody ever does? By day 4, my body stopped pretending. I woke up with a dull ache in my stomach that didn't feel like hunger anymore. It felt like something scraping. When I stood up, the room swayed and I had to brace my hand on the dresser until my vision stopped blurring. The sunlight coming through my blinds looked too bright, like it was mocking me for still being here, still doing the same routine alone. I drank water from the bathroom sink because it was the easiest thing to get without thinking. My hands shook so much the water splashed onto my shirt. I stared at the wet spot and felt my throat tighten with a kind of anger that didn't have anywhere to go. At school, the fog in my head got thicker. The teacher was talking, the class was moving pencils, scratching chairs, scraping, and I was floating above it like I wasn't fully in my own body. The board might as well have been written in another language. When I tried to copy notes, my handwriting came out uneven. I was aware of my own slowness in a way that made me panic because being noticed was dangerous. Being noticed could lead to questions. Questions could lead to the truth. Halfway through the morning, Mrs. Klein told me to stay after class. She waited until the other kids filed out, then closed the door softly behind them. "Zephyr," she said, lowering her voice, "you don't look well." "I'm fine," I said, automatically. She didn't accept it. "You've been pale all week. You didn't really eat at lunch yesterday. You got dizzy the other day. I'm sending you to the nurse." My stomach dropped. "I don't need yes." "You do," she said. Not harsh, just firm. "And I'm going to call home." The word home made my chest seize. I followed the hallway to the nurse's office like I was walking toward a cliff edge. The room smelled like antiseptic wipes and stale mints. The nurse took one look at me and her expression changed. "Sweetheart," she said, "did you eat breakfast?" I nodded too fast. "Yeah." She held my gaze like she'd been doing this long enough to know when kids lied to survive. "What did you eat?" I tried to answer and realized I couldn't come up with something believable. "Cereal," I said finally, because it was true, just not enough of the truth. She checked my temperature, then took my blood pressure, and the cuff squeezing my arm felt like a question I couldn't dodge. She asked for my parents' numbers. I gave them, my voice steady even though my insides were shaking. I watched her dial. I watched her listen. I watched her frown when it went to voicemail. She tried again. Same result. She wrote something on a clipboard with a slow, deliberate motion, the kind that becomes a record. "I'm going to leave a message," she said. "And I'm going to notify the front office that we can't reach your guardians." My mouth went dry. "They're busy," I blurted too quick. "They travel a lot." She didn't argue. She just nodded in that careful way adults do when they're trying not to scare a child while their mind is already moving toward a bigger protocol. "Okay," she said, "but we need someone to check on you." I went back to class with a pass in my hand and a new weight in my chest. I could feel the school system clicking into place around me, slow at first, like gears catching. The office would document the missed calls. The nurse would log the symptoms. Mrs. Klein would remember my face. And if my parents didn't respond, the school would keep trying. Not because they were dramatic, because this was what responsible adults did. On the walk home, I tried to tell myself I could still hold it together until my parents came back. I was repeating that lie when my foot caught on an uneven piece of sidewalk. I stumbled hard, my backpack pulling me sideways, and for a second, the world lurched. I threw my hands out and managed not to fall, but the shock of it sent my heart racing. It wasn't the near fall that scared me. It was the thought that followed like a shadow. If I hit my head, if I broke something, if I couldn't get up, no one would know. No one would be there to take me to a doctor. No one would sign anything. No one would even be able to say when it happened. When I got home, I went straight to my notebook and wrote it down like a report. Day 4. Time approximate. Nearly fell due to dizziness. No adult supervision. Risk injury with no immediate care. I added a note to take a photo if anything happened again. It felt insane documenting my own danger like it was a job, but it also made me feel less like prey. If I couldn't control what happened, I could control what was recorded. Later that afternoon, I tried to open one of the cans in the pantry. I didn't have a proper can opener because my mom never cooked anything that required one. I used a dull kitchen knife the way I'd seen people do in movies, which was the kind of decision an 11-year-old makes when he's hungry and nobody is there to stop him. The blade slipped. Pain flashed white-hot across my finger. I froze, staring at the thin line of blood like my brain couldn't process it. Then the blood started running faster and panic rose in my throat. I wrapped my finger in paper towels and pressed hard, breathing fast. My mind sprinted ahead to the worst case with the same cold logic I'd learned from my own fear. Infection, stitches, hospital, no parent, no consent, no ride. The paper towel turned red and I felt my chest tighten until it hurt. I didn't cry. I couldn't afford crying. I sat on the kitchen floor and pressed my finger until the bleeding slowed, then cleaned it as best I could with water and soap, biting down on the inside of my cheek to keep from making noise. When I finally stood up, I took a picture of the cut with my phone. The image looked wrong, like it belonged to a different kid's life. I added it to a folder I created and named something simple: proof. Then I sat at the table and wrote the details into evidence with the same numb precision. Day 4. Cut finger attempting to open can. No can opener available. No adult present. Fear level high. That evening my phone buzzed. For a second my heart lifted, ridiculous and hopeful. Then I saw it was a notification. A new post. My mother. The photo loaded slowly, and when it sharpened I felt something snap inside me. She was standing in front of a famous landmark, sunlight on her face, hair perfect, smile wide like she'd been waiting for someone to look. The caption was breezy celebratory, like she was talking to an audience. Finally free for a month. Free. Not miss my kid. Not checking in. Not can't wait to come home. Just free. Like I was the thing she'd escaped. My throat tightened so hard it felt like I couldn't swallow. I didn't comment. I didn't respond. I took a screenshot. I saved it. I stared at the timestamp and wrote it down beside the rest of the facts. Day 4. Mother posted. No contact. At some point the $20 bill in my wallet started feeling like an insult. It wasn't money. It was a prop. Still on day 5, I walked toward the corner store again because my body was getting weaker and I couldn't pretend it wasn't. The air outside was thick and humid and every step felt heavier. When I reached the store, I stood just outside the door watching the normal flow of people inside, parents buying snacks, a teenage boy grabbing a soda, an older woman counting change. I could have walked in and bought bread and something cheap. I could have avoided questions by acting confident. But then I saw Ms. Pilar Gomez behind the counter. She'd seen me before a few times with my parents, always polite, always quick. Her eyes landed on me through the glass and stayed there a beat too long, like her instinct was already catching on. She stepped closer to the counter, head tilting slightly. Even through the closed door, I could feel her question forming. "Are you okay? Where are your people?" My heart pounded. I turned away before she could open her mouth. I walked back home with my fists clenched, furious at myself and furious at the invisible leash my mother had left around my neck. Don't embarrass me. Don't bother the neighbors. Don't let anyone see. When I got back to my house, the mailbox flag was up. There was an envelope inside with the school's logo on the corner. My stomach dropped as I slid it out. It was a notice, formal language, something about inability to reach guardians, request for confirmation, follow-up required. The kind of paper adults take seriously. I stood in the doorway reading it, and I felt the world shifting again, gears turning faster now. The landline rang that evening. The sound was so sudden I jumped. It rang again, then again, filling the quiet house like an alarm. I stared at it across the room. If I picked up, I might hear the school. I might hear a responsible adult asking a question I couldn't dodge anymore. If I didn't pick up, I might lose the only chance for someone to notice before something worse happened. The phone stopped ringing. My chest burned with regret so sharp it felt like pain. A moment later, my cell buzzed with a missed call from an unknown number, then a second missed call, then a voicemail notification. I didn't listen. Not yet. I couldn't. My fear had become its own cage, and I was the one holding the lock. I went to the kitchen, opened my notebook, and wrote the new facts anyway, because facts were the only thing that didn't punish me for existing. Day 5. School attempted contact, mail received. Calls missed, parents still unreachable. I looked at the page, at the hard lines of my own handwriting, and I realized I'd built something bigger than a diary. I'd built a record that could outlast denial. That night I set my phone on the counter again and recorded the quietest video I'd ever made. Not because I wanted drama, because I was starting to feel in my bones that this was moving toward a moment I couldn't stop. I didn't know if the next knock on my door would be rescue or trouble. I only knew it was coming. The knock came when I least expected it and when I needed it the most. It wasn't a polite tap either. It was the kind of knock that carries urgency, the kind that makes your heart leap before your brain catches up. The doorbell rang once, then again, then the knocking came back, 3 sharp hits that sounded too loud in a house that had been swallowing sound for days. I froze in the kitchen with cereal dust on my fingers and a bandage wrapped around my cut like a cheap reminder that I could bleed in this house and nobody would know. The TV was on low in the living room, some daytime show laughing in the background, and the contrast made my skin crawl. My first instinct was to disappear. 11-year-old me believed in hiding the way some kids believe in prayer. If you stay quiet, maybe the danger passes. If you don't answer, maybe the person leaves. I stood there staring at the front door like it was an animal. Then my eyes dropped to my notebook on the table, evidence in heavy letters. I thought about the missed calls, the school letter, the nurse's clipboard, the voicemail I hadn't listened to because I was terrified of the questions it would bring. If I didn't open that door, I wasn't protecting my parents anymore. I was protecting the lie that I was fine. I was protecting the silence. The bell rang again. My stomach clenched. I wiped my hands on my shorts, took one breath that felt like swallowing glass, and walked to the door. I cracked it open just enough to see who was there, keeping the chain latched like the thin strip of metal could keep my life from spilling out. A man stood on the porch in a green jacket with the school crest stitched on the chest. He had a messenger bag slung across his shoulder and a badge clipped to his collar. Not a cop, not a neighbor, not a stranger in the wrong way. A school adult, the kind who belongs in hallways and offices that smell like dry erase markers. Zephyr Hollis, he asked, voice calm but serious. My throat tightened. Yeah. He gave a small nod like he'd confirmed a detail on a file. I'm Adrian Vance. I'm the school counselor. He didn't smile the way adults usually smile when they want something from a kid. He looked focused. Can I come in for a moment? I've been trying to reach your parents. My brain scrambled for the quickest lie. They're at work. They're busy. They're asleep. But the words tripped over each other because I couldn't make them sound real. They're not here, I said instead, too flat. Mr. Vance's eyes flicked over my face, my posture, the way I held myself like I was bracing for impact. He didn't push yet. Okay, he said gently. Can I step inside? I hesitated, then unlatched the chain. The door opened wider, and with it the smell of the house came out, stale air, old cereal, the faint metallic tang of dried blood on my finger. He stepped into the entryway and paused, taking in the quiet the way someone takes in a room after an alarm stops ringing. Thanks, he said. I'm not here to get you in trouble. Those words hit me in the chest because I didn't know if I believed them. In my world, adults always meant consequences. He followed me into the kitchen, and the house betrayed me before I could even decide which version of the truth to tell. The fruit bowl was almost empty. The sink had a couple dishes I'd been too tired to wash. The pantry door was slightly open, revealing more space than food. The emergency card sat on the counter where my mother had left it, shiny and useless. My notebook lay open on the table because I'd been writing in it earlier and forgot to close it. The word evidence stared up like it wanted to speak for me. Mr. Vance's gaze moved slowly, careful not to look like accusation, but his eyes didn't miss anything. Zephyr, he said. Where are your parents? The old instinct surged. Protect them. Make it smooth. Keep the family looking normal. They're out of town, I said. He waited. How long? I swallowed. A little while. His eyes shifted to my bandaged finger. Did you do that at school? I shook my head. At home. Another pause. His voice lowered, not threatening, just direct. Are you alone here? My mouth went dry. This was the line. The one where if I crossed it, nothing could go back. I glanced at the notebook without meaning to, and it felt like the page had weight, like it pulled my gaze the way gravity pulls an object. If I lied, I would be lying on top of my own record. Yes, I whispered. Just me. Mr. Vance's expression changed in a way I'll never forget. It wasn't anger. It was something sharper, professional concern switching into action. He pulled a chair out and sat at the table like he was grounding himself so he didn't react too fast. He motioned for me to sit across from him. Okay, he said quietly. How long have you been alone? I stared at my hands. The bandage was already slightly gray at the edge from where. About a week, I said. Almost. And your parents are? Where? Europe, I said. and the word sounded unreal coming out of my mouth. They said a month. His eyebrows rose and his jaw tightened. He didn't hide it. A month, he repeated like he was tasting the wrongness of it. Zephyr, who was supposed to check on you. No one, I said. My voice was steadier now, not because I was brave, but because once you say the truth, your body stops spending energy trying to hold it down. They left me $20. And that card. I nodded toward the counter. But it doesn't work. It's not activated. I tried. Mr. Vance stared at the card, then back at me, as if he was counting all the points where this crossed into danger. Do you have enough food? I gave a short laugh that didn't sound like me. Not really. He leaned forward, hands folded on the table. Zephyr, I need to be very clear with you. His voice stayed calm, but there was steel in it now. Leaving an 11-year-old alone for a week, let alone a month, without supervision, with limited food and no plan is not okay. It's dangerous. The word that came next made my heart thud hard. It can be neglect, he said. There are laws about this. Neglect. Laws. Those were words adults used in serious voices on TV. I'd never heard them aimed at my kitchen table. What happens if someone finds out, I asked, and my voice came out small again despite my effort. He didn't flinch. He didn't sugarcoat it. He didn't try to scare me either. Child Protective Services can get involved, he said carefully. There can be an investigation. Your parents may have to answer questions. There could be consequences. Consequences. My mother's favorite word. She used it like a weapon when I left a mess or forgot a chore. Actions have consequences, Zephyr. I heard it in my head like an echo. Mr. Vance watched my face, then glanced at the open notebook. Is that your notes, he asked. I hesitated, then slid the notebook toward him. The pages weren't dramatic. They were dates lists, the cold line of no calls, no check-ins, the near fall, the cut, the screenshot timestamps I'd copied down. His eyes moved across the page, and something in his posture tightened. You've been documenting, he said softly. I didn't know what else to do. I admitted. I didn't want someone to say I was lying. He nodded slowly. That's smart, he said, and the word smart hit me in a strange place because it didn't feel like praise. It felt like recognition. You shouldn't have to do this, but you're doing exactly what helps the truth stay intact. He looked at me directly. Do you want help, Zephyr? The question hung in the air like a held breath. Help meant adults. Adults meant exposure. Exposure meant my mother's anger, my father's denial, the collapse of the image they guarded like it was more fragile than me. Part of me wanted to say no and wait it out to survive quietly and then pretend the month was a bad dream. But another part of me, older than 11 even then, was tired of being invisible. Yes, I said finally. My voice shook, but the word landed solid. I do. Mr. Vance didn't rush to congratulate me or comfort me. He just asked, "What do you need?" I swallowed hard. I want them to see it, I said. I want people to see what this actually was, not what they say it was. I don't want them to talk their way out of it. His eyes softened, but his tone stayed firm. Okay, he said. First, we make sure you're safe. Then we make sure the right people hear what happened. He stood and stepped into the hallway with his phone, turning his back slightly as if giving me privacy while he did the thing that would change everything. I stayed at the kitchen table with my notebook open and my phone beside it like two pieces of me laid out on display. Through the wall, I heard fragments of his voice, controlled, professional, specific. Student is alone, he said, 11 years old. Parents out of the country. No verified guardian. Limited food. We've attempted contact multiple times. My chest tightened with a mix of fear and something else I hated admitting, relief. Every word he said felt like a chain locking into place around the lie my parents built. He came back into the kitchen and met my eyes. I'm calling your closest neighbor, he said, and I've contacted the Child Protection Hotline. The air in the room changed. The moment the call went out, it was no longer just my secret. It became a report, a process. A system. I looked down at evidence and realized I had crossed a line I couldn't uncross. Mrs. Helen Barrow arrived first, and she didn't come in like someone annoyed to be bothered. She came in like someone who'd just realized a child had been drowning next door while she watered her plants and waved hello. Mr. Vance opened the door for her, and she stepped into my kitchen with both hands held close to her chest, as if she was trying not to break something fragile. She was in her late 60s, hair pulled back, wearing a loose cardigan that smelled faintly of vanilla and laundry soap. Her eyes found me immediately, and I saw the shock hit her face in layers. My pale skin, the bandage on my finger, the tight set of my shoulders, the emptiness around me. "Oh, honey," she breathed, and her voice sounded like a door opening. "Zephyr, why didn't you come to me?" The question stabbed deep because it wasn't accusation, it was grief. I stared at the floor because looking at kindness felt like looking at something I wasn't allowed to touch. I didn't want to bother you," I said, and the words tasted like my mother's note. "And my mom." I stopped. Mrs. Barrow's eyes moved to the landline table and the little yellow paper taped beside it. She crossed the room and read it, and her mouth tightened. She turned back to me slowly. "She told you not to ask for help," she said, more statement than question. I nodded once. My throat burned. "They always said I was mature," I whispered. "They said I could handle things. I thought if I asked for help, it meant I wasn't what they wanted me to be." Mrs. Barrow's face crumpled in a way that made her look younger, like she was letting herself feel the full horror. She reached out and touched my shoulder, gentle. "Asking for help isn't weakness," she said. "It's survival. And no child should be trained to protect an adult's pride." Mr. Vance stood nearby, watching her take in the room, the empty fruit bowl, the thin pantry, the emergency card. He didn't interrupt. He let her see it because the house did its own talking. When the caseworker arrived, she came with a calm that made everything feel official. Her name was Tessa Lang. She introduced herself at the door with a badge and a soft voice that didn't rise or fall, like she'd learned how to keep children from panicking while keeping adults from dodging. She stepped into the kitchen, greeted Mrs. Barrow and Mr. Vance, then focused on me. "Hi, Zephyr," she said, kneeling slightly so her eyes were level with mine. "I'm here to make sure you're safe. Can you tell me how long your parents have been gone?" 7 days, I said. "They planned a month. Have any adults been checking on you?" "No," I said, and the word felt both heavy and clean. "Have your parents called you?" I hesitated, then pulled my phone out and opened the messages. "Not really," I said. She sent a picture. I showed her the selfie, my mother smiling in bright European sunlight, caption talking about freedom. Tessa didn't react dramatically. She didn't sigh or shake her head like she wanted to be the hero of my story. She just nodded once slow and asked, "May I take note of that?" "Yes," I said, and my fingers moved without trembling now. I took screenshots. I made sure the timestamp was visible. I showed her my call log, missed calls from school numbers, and no incoming calls from my parents. Facts on a screen that didn't care about excuses. Tessa stood and began looking around the kitchen with permission, not invasion. She opened the fridge and paused. She opened the pantry and paused longer. Her eyes lingered on the expired leftovers, the thin cereal box, the lack of anything that could sustain a child for more than a day. She turned to the counter and picked up the emergency card. "Have you used this?" she asked. "It declines," I said. "No PIN," Mr. Vance added. He tried multiple apps. He documented the attempts. Tessa nodded, making notes. Then she asked if I had any written record. I slid the notebook toward her, and the word evidence sat at the top, like a label on a file. She flipped through slowly, careful not to tear anything, and I watched her eyes change the same way Mr. Vance's had concern, turning into certainty. "You've done a good job recording," she said. "I'm sorry you felt like you had to." While they spoke in low voices about next steps, I slipped away for a moment and set my phone up on the counter again, angled toward the fridge. My hands moved with a strange steadiness, like this wasn't me being dramatic. It was me making sure the reality existed outside my body. I hit record and panned slowly across the nearly empty shelves, the quiet kitchen table, Tessa's bag resting on a chair like an anchor dropped into my life. "This is what the house looked like when people finally noticed," I said quietly into the camera. "This is what my parents will walk into when they come back." I stopped recording and saved it immediately, heart thumping hard but clean. Not fear now. Not only fear. A kind of fierce clarity. If my mother ever tried to say there was plenty of food, if my father ever tried to laugh it off as a misunderstanding, the video would answer without emotion. Tessa came back to me and spoke with careful firmness. "Zephyr, for now you will not be alone again," she said. "We're arranging temporary placement while we contact your parents and determine the next steps. Mrs. Barrow has agreed to have you stay with her if you're comfortable." Mrs. Barrow's hand lifted immediately, palm open, like she was offering me a place to land. "Of course," she said. "He can stay with me as long as he needs." Tessa looked at me. "Is that okay with you?" I thought about my house at night, the way the silence got louder after dark. I thought about the landline ringing and me freezing instead of answering because I was trained to hide. I thought about my mother's caption "free" and how it felt like she'd cut a rope and called it self-care. "Yes," I said. "I want to stay somewhere I'm not invisible." The walk to Mrs. Barrow's house was only a few steps across a patch of grass, but it felt like crossing into a different life. Her kitchen smelled like onions and butter. Her table had placemats like someone expected people to sit down and eat. Her fridge was full, not just technically full, but full in a way that said someone planned for tomorrow. My stomach growled so loudly I wanted to disappear again, but she didn't tease or pity me. She just opened cabinets and started pulling things out like feeding a kid was the most normal duty in the world. "We'll make spaghetti," she said. "And you can help me if you want." I nodded because I didn't trust my voice. When the water started boiling and the smell of garlic hit the air, something inside me cracked, not into pieces, but open. The first bite later tasted like warmth and safety, and it made my eyes sting. I kept my face down, twirling noodles, pretending it was nothing. Mr. Vance stayed long enough to remind us quietly. Keep the grocery receipts, and the practicality of it made me feel seen in a strange way. Not seen as a victim, seen as a witness with a record. Mrs. Barrow brought out a small envelope and slid the receipt into it like it mattered, because it did. It proved what wasn't in my house before today. Tessa sat with me after dinner and went over facts again. Dates, times, last contact. She asked me to show her the only message my mother had sent, the selfie, and she noted it. "We'll attempt contact tonight," she said. "Your parents will be informed." The idea of my parents being informed didn't bring relief. It brought a cold awareness. They weren't going to come back because they missed me. They were going to come back because someone with authority was now staring at their choices. Before bed, Tessa told Mrs. Barrow and me, "We'll be in touch tomorrow. If they respond, you'll know. If they don't, that's information too." After she left, I went to the guest room Mrs. Barrow had prepared for me. Clean sheets, a lamp by the bed, a glass of water already set on the nightstand like someone anticipated my needs. I set my notebook on the bed and slid the grocery receipt into it behind the pages I'd already filled. Evidence wasn't just words anymore. It was paper. It was timestamps. It was a witness next door, a counselor from school, a caseworker's notes, a video file saved in my phone. Layers. My phone buzzed once while I was staring at the ceiling. Not a message from my parents. A notification that my mother had posted again, another photo, another bright smile, another caption about the trip. I took a screenshot without hesitation and saved it alongside the others. The pattern was becoming its own proof. Then, late enough that the house was quiet, Mrs. Barrow's landline rang. She answered softly in the kitchen, and I listened from the hallway, holding my breath. I didn't catch every word, but I heard the tone shift, heard the seriousness settle in. When she hung up, she turned toward me, face tight with concern. "That was Tessa," she said. "She said your parents have been notified." I swallowed. "What did they say?" Mrs. Barrow hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "They didn't ask if you were okay," she said. "They asked what this was going to do to them." My chest went hollow, then strangely steady, because that confirmed what my notebook had been saying all along. Their silence wasn't forgetfulness. It was priority. I lay back down in the guest bed, the clean sheets unfamiliar against my skin, and stared at the dark ceiling. Somewhere out there across an ocean, my parents were being told that their month of freedom had turned into an investigation. And I could already feel the next part coming, like distant thunder calls, excuses, anger, maybe tears. Not for me, for the image they were about to lose. We went back to the house the morning they returned. Walking through the front door after days away felt like stepping into a version of my life that had been paused mid-breath. The air was stale, the rooms too quiet, the light unchanged, as if nothing important had happened here. But everything had. The kitchen was no longer just a kitchen. It had been turned into a place where truth would sit in plain sight and refuse to move. Tessa Lang arrived first, followed by her supervisor, Renee Maddox. Mr. Adrian Vance stood near the counter with his folder from the school tucked under his arm. Mrs. Helen Barrow stayed close to me, not touching, just present like a steady wall at my back. CPS placed their thick file on the table, the sound of it landing echoing louder than it should have. I opened my notebook myself and turned it to the first page, the word evidence written in dark, heavy letters. I set my phone beside it, the screen already awake, paused on the first frame of the video from day 3. My own face stared back at me from the screen, smaller, paler eyes, too serious for an 11-year-old. Tessa asked quietly if I was sure. I nodded. I didn't want this handled around me. I wanted it handled in front of me. The sound of tires on the driveway came next. Then the slam of car doors. Then voices light and casual floating through the walls like nothing inside them was about to break. My heart started to pound, but my head stayed cold. I knew the order of things now. I knew the timeline better than anyone. The front door opened. My mom came in first, dragging her suitcase the same way she had when she left, coat still neat, sunglasses pushed up on her head like she was walking off a runway instead of into a reckoning. My dad followed, juggling bags, still talking about the flight, still half on his phone. Their voices stopped when they saw the kitchen. They didn't look at me right away. They looked at the adults, the badge, the folders, the number of people who clearly did not belong there. "What is this?" my mom demanded, dropping the suitcase handle. "Why are there strangers in my kitchen?" Her eyes snapped to me, then sharp and accusing, like I had rearranged the world without permission. My dad tried to smile, tried to smooth the moment the way he always did. "There's been some kind of misunderstanding," he said lightly. "We can clear this up." Renee Maddox stood and introduced herself, her voice calm and precise. "We're here regarding concerns about your son's safety while you were out of the country." My mom didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't ask how I was feeling. She asked who called you. That answer was already on the table. Mr. Vance didn't speak yet. Mrs. Barrow didn't speak. CPS let the silence do its work. My dad cleared his throat. "Zephyr is very mature," he said. "We trusted him. He had money. He had a card. He knows how to take care of himself." Renee slid the first document forward. "This is the activation record for the emergency card," she said. It was never activated. No PIN was set. Another page followed. "These are transaction attempts showing the card was declined when Zephyr tried to order food." Another. "These are photographs of the refrigerator and pantry taken during the first week of your trip." My mom crossed her arms. "Expired food doesn't mean he was starving," she snapped. Renee placed the call logs on top of the stack. "These are the phone records. One image sent from the airport. One selfie from Europe. No calls checking on your child." My dad's face lost its color. My mom shook her head faster now, defensive. "He's exaggerating," she said. "He's always been dramatic." Tessa turned to me. "Zephyr, would you like them to see the video you recorded?" My hand trembled as I reached for the phone, but I didn't hesitate. I tapped the screen, the kitchen filled with my own voice from days earlier. Small, careful, day 3. "I'm still alone. The card doesn't work. I ate the last decent thing in the fridge yesterday." The video moved slowly across the empty shelves, the quiet table, the stillness that had felt so loud at night. "If you are seeing this, it means someone finally asked what happened to me." My mom's hand flew to her mouth. She took a step back like the image itself had shoved her. No, she whispered. No. This can't be happening. My dad stared at the floor, shoulders sagging, the story he'd been preparing finally collapsing under its own weight. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I said the words my mother had drilled into me my whole life. You always told me actions have consequences, I said quietly. This is what your choice looks like. Renee read the decision aloud. Based on the findings, this met the criteria for neglect under state guidelines. An emergency order would be put in place. I would not return to unsupervised care. Temporary placement would continue with Mrs. Barrow. Contact would be limited and supervised. My mom turned to me, then eyes wet, desperate. Tell them you want to come home, she said. Please, we can fix this. I looked at her and felt something settle inside me. Not anger, not victory, just clarity. I want to be safe, I said. The room went quiet again, and this time it stayed that way. The weeks that followed didn't feel like a clean rescue. They felt like waking up from a long fever and realizing the room you're in is real, but your body still expects pain. Mrs. Barrow's house stayed warm and steady. Breakfast smells, clean towels, someone asking how I slept like it actually mattered. And that warmth did something strange. It didn't erase the hurt. It made it sharper. Because once you know what normal care feels like, you realize how long you lived without it. I went to school with a new awareness that adults were watching, not in a cruel way, in a protective way. Mr. Vance checked in quietly, never making a spectacle of me. The nurse smiled at me like she was relieved to see color back in my face. Tessa called regularly, asking simple questions that built a record: how I felt, what I ate, whether I'd heard anything from my parents through approved channels. I kept writing, not because I was starving now, but because the habit had become my anchor. Date, time, what was said, what was done. My parents tried to reach me anyway. They couldn't call me directly, so they sent messages through the department. My mother wrote paragraphs about heartbreak and growth, about how she was changing, about how she'd never forgive herself. But even in those messages, the center kept sliding back to her. How humiliating it was. How unfair it felt. How people were judging her. My father's messages were shorter, smoother, like he believed the right phrasing could reset everything. We miss you. We made mistakes. Just say you want to come home and this will calm down. And that was the hardest part, realizing they weren't fighting to understand me. They were fighting to regain control of the story. The hearing came faster than I expected. Family court in Chatham County didn't look like TV. It wasn't dramatic lighting and shouting lawyers. It was beige walls, fluorescent buzz, and the heavy smell of paper. The courtroom was smaller than my classroom. The judge sat up front with a tired kind of focus, like she'd seen every excuse adults could invent. My mother and father sat at their table, dressed carefully, faces arranged like they were stepping into church. Their lawyer leaned close and whispered often. Tessa sat with another representative from the department. Renee was there too, straight-backed, a quiet force. Mrs. Barrow sat behind me like a protective shadow. Mr. Vance was there with his notes and calm eyes. When they called my name, my stomach tightened so hard I thought I might be sick. Tessa told me I could speak from where I sat. I didn't have to stand in front of everyone like a defendant. That mattered. I held my notebook in my lap, not because anyone asked for it, but because it reminded me I was real. They presented the timeline like a map of a fire. Date my parents left. The statement that they planned a month. No guardian arranged. No notification to school. The emergency card record. The declined transaction attempts. The photos of the pantry and fridge. The nurse's notes about my dizziness. Mr. Vance's documentation of school contact attempts. Mrs. Barrow's receipt and her testimony about what she saw when she walked into my kitchen. Then came the videos. I didn't watch them again. I couldn't. But I listened as my own voice played in that quiet courtroom, and it felt like hearing a ghost speak facts nobody wanted to hear. I heard myself say I was alone. I heard myself say the card didn't work. I heard myself say I ate the last decent thing yesterday. I heard myself say, if you're seeing this, it means someone finally asked what happened to me. My mother's breath hitched somewhere behind me. My father sat stiff eyes fixed forward. When the judge asked me questions, they were simple and sharp. How long were you alone? Did your parents check on you? Did you have enough food? Were you afraid? I answered the way I'd learned to answer in my notebook, clear, precise, no drama. 7 days when the school counselor came. They planned a month. I had $20. The card didn't work. They did not call to check if I ate. I was scared. I was hungry. I didn't tell anyone because I was afraid of embarrassing my mother. That last sentence made the judge's eyes narrow slightly, like a door closing. My parents' lawyer tried to frame it as a misunderstanding. Stress. Hard-working parents. A mature child. My mother spoke about needing a break, about believing I could handle it, about not meaning to hurt me. My father nodded along, using words like trust and independence like they were protective blankets. But the blanket didn't cover the numbers. It didn't cover the call logs. It didn't cover the empty fridge. It didn't cover my voice recorded in the dark. The judge didn't raise her voice. She didn't scold. Her calm made it worse for my parents because it meant she wasn't emotional. She was certain. She ruled that my parents would have supervised visits only for a period determined by compliance and evaluation. Parenting classes were mandatory. A psychological evaluation was required. Any contact would be monitored and scheduled. Custody would not return automatically, not because the court wanted to punish them like a movie villain, but because the court no longer assumed they were safe by default. That was the real consequence. The loss of the automatic right to be believed. The loss of the automatic right to access me whenever they wanted. On the way out, my mother tried to catch my eye, her face trembling with tears she wanted me to fix. Zephyr, she whispered, as if my name alone could pull me back into place. Please, we can still be a family. I didn't answer in the hallway. I didn't because I hated her, and I didn't because I was cruel. I didn't because I finally understood that my feelings were not a tool for her repair. In the car with Mrs. Barrow afterward, my hands shook as the adrenaline drained, and I stared out the window at Savannah's trees and quiet streets. The same city, the same summer, but a different life. Mrs. Barrow didn't ask me to forgive. She just reached over and squeezed my shoulder once. You did the right thing, she said. You chose safety. Years later, that sentence still echoes. Safety. Not perfection. Not a clean, happy ending. Safety. I'm 31 now, sitting at a desk late at night in Savannah with a risk file open in front of me, and I can still smell that old kitchen when I close my eyes. I work in compliance and investigations because my brain learned early what it means when a person with power decides the story matters more than the child inside it. People like to think I chose this field because I'm good at patterns, because I'm meticulous, because I have the temperament for it. The truth is uglier and simpler. I learned to live by records because I once had to prove I existed in a house where love could be rewritten into independence and neglect could be called trust. My parents still try sometimes, through approved channels at first, later through careful rebuilding. My mother writes about growth. My father talks about therapy like it's a box he checked. Maybe parts of them changed. Maybe parts never will. I don't pretend I'm untouched. I don't pretend I'm healed in a straight line. But I know what I know. The day they came home expecting souvenirs and stories, my mother walked into a table covered in proof and a room full of adults who refused to let her talk her way out of reality. When she gasped, "No. No. This can't be happening," she wasn't reacting to a sudden disaster. She was reacting to finally seeing what had been happening the entire time since the moment she chose a plane ticket over her child. And the only reason she had to see it was because I stopped being the kid who carried their image. I became the kid who carried the truth. When I think back on that summer, what stays with me isn't just the hunger or the silence. It's how quickly a child can learn to disappear, and how one steady, ordinary act of kindness can pull them back into the light. If there's anything we carry out of stories like this, maybe it's a softer kind of courage, the kind that looks like noticing, asking one more question, leaving a door open without demanding an explanation. We don't always get the ending we imagined, Sometimes we just get a chance to be safer, to be seen, to start again with clearer boundaries and a little more care. And if you're listening with your own memories pressed up against your ribs, I hope you know you're not strange for feeling it. You're human. If you'd like to be part of a corner of the internet where stories are heard without being judged, you can subscribe and stay with us. And if you want, leave a few lines in the comments where you're watching from or what this brought up for you. I read more than you think. Thank you for sitting with me, and I'll see you in the next story.